Hello, everyone. My name is Don Harkey. I'm with People Centric Consulting Group, and we are doing the series of videos we're calling Surviving to Thriving. And the idea is that we are working through this crisis to survive today, but so that we can also thrive tomorrow, because we're sick of just surviving. We're not really hardwired that way as humans. So I'm really excited to have my friend Erik Meirer on the call here from Detroit. Erik is the president of Sandler Training, the Meier Group. He developed an interest in sales and management training business when he realized the need for people to get out of their own way in order to overachieve. That speaks to my heart as an engineer converted to salesperson, so you get out of your own way. His favorite part of working as an advisor to organizations and individuals is helping them to discover their true potential and value by eliminating their head trash and self-imposed limitations. That's why I think we hit it off. Plus, I know your dad, so that's pretty cool too. He's here today to advise you how to stop selling more, how to avoid acting, sounding, looking, and feeling salesy for your prospects. And in fact, he wants you to do the exact opposite. And I thought he would be great to have on here. So Erik, really appreciate you joining me here.
Yeah, thanks, Don. I was looking forward to it.
Yeah, fantastic. So, I mean, just share a little bit about what things you're seeing with your clients. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing the sales teams that you work with going through right now?
Yeah, so there are a couple that are really starting to show up and definitely have a magnifying glass on them in a different way than they did a couple of weeks ago. Probably the first one is, how do you manage a mobile and dispersed sales team that you're no longer spending face time with?
Yeah.
And that's for a lot of companies, this is the first time they've ever really had to deal with that and really had to manage that. And it can be incredibly difficult. And thankfully, we're finding that clients of ours that have good sales plans in place, have good sales accountability cultures in place, are able to do it better and have made that shift cleaner. And then we're also finding that the ones that haven't, hopefully this is a good reminder as to why that's so important. Because without that there, it can be very difficult to, I think as a leader, feel good about what's happening with your team. And then that also is difficult because, what we don't want to do is micromanage, which is kind of the other way of looking at it. So, having good plans in place to be able to work with a remote sales team, that one's definitely top of mind. We're seeing a lot of good strategy conversations around that. Probably the other one is mindset around, what does selling mean in a time like this, right? What's ethical selling supposed to be in a time like this? And I've got my own version of what I think that means. And it's probably good to remember that it never changed, right? So ethical selling for me has always been, find real problems you can find real solutions for and solve them. That was the same thing it was 4 weeks ago. It's going to be the same thing it is 4 months from now. If you were selling crap before, stop doing it now, right?
Yeah, right.
So working on that mindset, and we call it the trouble line, making sure we're on the right side of the trouble line, thinking about it in a healthy way.
I love that point. So if you felt like you were salesy before this, or if you felt like you had an unhealthy team before this, you're going to be feeling the pain of this even more right now.
Yes.
If you're struggling with your culture of your organization or your sales team, it's not going to help right now being remote. And it's definitely not going to help in terms of being salesy. So what kinds of things are you seeing salespeople that are successful? What are they doing right now? Because like you said, there's a little bit almost of an embargo of like, I don't want to feel like I'm selling things to people too much. I don't want to call them right now. They're struggling to maintain payroll and keep their people employed and stay healthy.
Yep.
And then you show up with your thing that you're going to sell. How do you show up a little bit differently? Or else, like your point was maybe the same as you've always shown up, but lean into that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always appropriate language in conversations that are specific to environment. So, there's a specific environment that we're selling in right now. So there's some good shifts that should be made there. I think, one of the things that we're finding, you and I were talking about this before, we started recording, is really understanding who to go prospect to and where strategically we should probably spend our time. So, one of the exercises that we went through with my company and one of the exercises I've been helping our clients with is to understand the marketing matrix and how that applies to strategically prospecting today. Look, there's a reality in there that some companies and industries have really been impacted in a very negative way because of this. They literally can't operate. They've had to lay off almost all, if not all, of their staff. They may never come back from it, or it's going to be incredibly difficult to come back from it. none of it was in their control, but they're in that box, right? They're probably not good people to be having sales calls with right now. They're better people to be just talking to make sure they're doing okay, right? But then there's this other side where they're changing how they're doing business, but they live in an essentials world, or they live in a world where they still need to solve the same problems they needed to solve before we dropped into the pandemic and the shelter in place stuff. So if you can think of like the four quadrants, up on the top left, we'll call that one need and want stuff, right? So if you can picture this, this is what those prospects sell to their clients. So there are companies and industries that sell need and want stuff. Those are things that people make a decision to buy every day, every week. Their consumer choice there is, who do I buy it from? But the consumer's not trying to figure out if they're going to buy it. They're going to buy it from someone, just who do they buy it from, right?
Right.
So, companies that sell into the need and want space or produce things for need and want spaces, those are great prospects to be going out and talking to right now. They're running at a frenzied pace in some cases, and they need more help than they did need 4 weeks ago. Yeah. And they've got revenues coming in still, and they've got an opportunity to buy things and solve problems.
So give us an example of a company like that, an industry that's in that spot right now.
Yeah, so think of food industries, right? Food industries, as long as their supply chains haven't been, disrupted too much, and in most cases they haven't been, they made the shift. They're still growing through this thing. People are buying food. They buy food every day. They're buying it from places. They're making those decisions. But companies that provide back-end support for that kind of stuff, they're growing through this, right? Technology organizations that sell things like Zoom, right, as an example. These groups right now are doing a lot of work. They're growing. They're continuing to expand. They're building new tech. So anyone in that tech space where it's essential to business operations and flow, cell phone producers and carriers, and people are making a decision right now. Hopefully it's not so dire, and if it is, we've got tons of passion, but the last thing they want to do, if they can, is turn off their cell phone, right? So anyone who sells into the channel of that stuff, those companies are still producing things and they're still driving revenue.
Right.
So some of those are those need and want categories.
Yeah. So some of it is, so you're talking about this matrix, and the matrix is a chart, right? Need and want.
Yep.
You look at it in different quadrants, and then you can prioritize who you're talking to.
Exactly.
What do those calls look like right now when you're just calling on either a client or a potential client?
Yeah. So if it's new business, and I'm a firm believer of that. I mean, we're doing it for ourselves in my business. We're having prospecting conversations with new opportunities, and we're scheduling meetings, and we've closed business during this process in this period. Clients of ours are using the same strategy to do the same things. But the conversation, if you're going for, so let's look at the other parts of that matrix real quick. So the need and want side, if they fit in there, it's probably good to just have whatever sales conversation you had, if it was effective before, have it again, right? The best thing to not do there is to think that somehow that's changed, because it really hasn't, right? Maybe you want to suggest a webinar instead of going to get a coffee at Starbucks, but
right.
That part's changed.
Yeah, that part's changed. Yeah.
But then, like on the bottom, opposite corner there is the don't need, don't want side, right? Now those people there, they sell things that are hard to sell in any environment. They're probably getting hit pretty hard right now. If you've got clients that are in that space, you want to make sure that you're there for them, you support them, and however you can support them, just be a good neighbor there, be a good friend. They're probably dealing with some struggles, and they're just trying to be able to hang on and get through this thing, right? Same thing with the, want, don't need category. So that one would go next to don't want, don't need. That's typically luxury items. So these would be things that people want but don't necessarily need. So as they're trying to figure out where they spend and invest resources, that stuff's kind of getting set to the side too. But next to the need and want is need but don't want. So those are typically things that are required but reluctantly purchased. So like car insurance, I think that, kind of fits into that bucket.
Yeah.
You do have to get it. You don't want it, but you still have to get it. So if we're looking at these need and want, need and want, don't want but need categories, there's probably one talk track in there, at least I think it's changed a little bit, Don. I like to ask what camp whoever I'm talking to would sit in. And I just kind of describe it as a two camp environment. So camp one, um, is someone that's been impacted and affected by what's going on right now. Because of that, they really just had to make a decision to try to get through it. That's okay. If that's the case, that's fine. There's no right or wrong version of how you handle this stuff. But that's one camp. And camp two, they may have been affected to some degree, or maybe not even at all. And what they are doing is they're using this as an opportunity to be able to try to figure out how to solve big problems in advance of what they know is going to be some type of return to a sense of normalcy. So, I like to ask which camp that person sits in. Are they camp one or are they camp two, right? If they're camp one, that's okay. It's probably not the right time to recommend a sales conversation. Work on bonding and rapport, right? This will end at some point. You don't want to offend people during this time, right? But if they're in camp two, find out if they've got problems you can solve and fix and make appropriate recommendations to do it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think you hit two key things there that I think sometimes the teams that we work with, company-wise, or sales teams are struggling with a little bit. One is, first of all the things that you said imply that you're going to have a conversation with both your potential clients and your clients.
Yes.
So you should be contacting folks like crazy right now.
Yep.
Calling them and just checking in on them. And then second thing is when you're calling them, and this is a good sales tactic no matter what you're doing, but you should be listening to them.
Mm-hmm.
What are you needing? Where is your situation right now? And I like this idea of not presuming, well, I'm going into the call of saying, well, I'm presuming you're just circling the wagons. You don't want anything I have to buy ever again. So I'm not calling you for that. Don't
Right.
take that stuff off the table. I think what you're doing by asking like where you're at and asking about the situation is you're looking for the best way that you can help them, which is the best way to sell anyway.
Yes.
But you're also trying to you're also not taking something off the table that might be. Because you're right, both of us are in a neither one of us are in the you want it and you have to have it category.
No.
Right. Yeah, because you can cut both of us in different spots, right? So I mean, maybe we'll edit this out of the video for both of us. But both of you and I, we've closed business recently too. I mean, in this last week, we brought in new business. And there are existing clients that are still working with both of us, pretty well. And a lot of it's just reaching out to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, there's something in there too with just the idea and the mindset and the belief system, I think, for salespeople right now. If they're talking to companies or industries that have been financially impacted by some of this and they're hesitant to try to have sales calls there, and again, these rules, you go back 4 weeks ago, they're the same rules that applied there, but just situationally, if they haven't thought about it like this, hopefully this gets their mindset back in the right spot. If we're finding appropriate problems that are causing issues, those issues probably also cost that company money. So, if you were ever worried about the investment in whatever we sell being, +1 to what they're spending, if we're solving good problems, we're cost-cutting specialists right now. Not just you and I, but for everyone, right? Thinking about that, you're a cost-cutting specialist if you're solving big problems, you're solving relevant issues, and companies need to do that now more than ever. I think it's a healthy mindset.
Yeah, but you can't discover that unless you have the conversations with your clients and your potential prospects, and you have to know where they're at. And you can solve. We always say if you can solve any problem for a client, help them or point them in the right direction, or a potential client, I mean, that helps to build that relationship, and then you can look for that connection piece.
Aggressively waiting for the phone to ring would not be a good strategy right
now. And we've heard, I was sharing again before we jumped on here, that we've heard some sales teams who are saying like, I'm just going to take the next 3 or 4 weeks off because there's really nothing that we can do.
Yep.
And you were strenuously disagreeing with that, right? I mean, it's
And I've been floored, amazed, re-energized, impressed by our clients and what they're doing right now to take the right mindset into this environment to be problem solvers and to look at it the right way and not say, well, we'll just camp out for a couple of weeks and see what happens. But to get out there and really be leaders in it and be professional salespeople, have the conversations and make this the kind of time where they can look back 6 months from now and go, I did the right stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I knew it then, but I'm seeing it now, right?
Yeah. So do you think as this, so I mean, I love your tips there. I mean, first thing is you have to be talking to folks. If you're in sales, you should be talking to, that's so obvious, but it's easy to circle the wagons right now, especially working from home and working remotely and that kind of thing. If you own a business and you're seeing your sales team struggle now, or they struggled before, they're probably going to struggle now.
Mm-hmm.
So that you got to keep that in mind. That's another reason why you want to work on the culture of your sales team. Asking good questions and listening to those answers is a good part to that. Do you think there's going to be like different phases in this? So one of the things we've talked about in this crisis is that initially when we were calling people, starting about 3 weeks ago, one of the things we heard was just like, I don't even know what's happening right now. I'm in crisis mode. We're doing strategic planning to figure out how we're going to get through tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's very short-term focused. Now you're starting just to hear some people go, okay, now I know what I'm doing, what I'm going to get in terms of assistance. I'm applied for financial aid or the PPP or things like that are out there.
Yep.
They're starting to hit like a different phase. And then I can imagine like there's going to be another phase where we get to start to return to normal and emerge from our houses again with the bright sun in our faces. Do you see how do you see in terms of sales teams responding in those different phases?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can probably be accused of being overly optimistic sometimes, just as a general mindset. But I think
Make it right now, yeah. That's good.
But if I'm looking at the reality of conversations and just trying to be a realist with it, yeah, I think you described it very well. So, when the shelter-in-place orders came out and all this stuff first came out, there was a lot of shift very quickly to, we got to be able to figure out how to survive, plan, get strategic about what we're going to be doing going forward, not knowing when it's coming to an end, and all that stuff had to happen. And then, you got today, the banks all released an opportunity for small businesses to apply for the PPP, and you've got some of the other stimulus stuff coming out. I'm finding now in those conversations that I'm having, at least with the sales leaders that I work with, that they're feeling more optimistic about this being kind of, the let's move forward point. So if that hasn't happened yet, that's starting to become more of a reality is, let's start doing what we need to do to move this forward. Right? Not what do we have to do to kind of get through it. And the good sellers and the healthy mindset sellers that I'm seeing there, I'm helping them and encouraging them to be building out plans in line with that conversation 6 months from now. So when they look back, what are the conversations they want to have about right now? Do they want to be saying to themselves, I really wish I had called that client. I really wish I had reached out to that person. I really wish I had, posted a video like you and I are doing, right?
Yeah.
And what I want them to do is think about that and then go back and put that in their sales plan and do it. Do it now. Do it today.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think there's a little bit of, we talked a little bit about fear. You talk about optimism, and sometimes the opposite of that is fear, or fear drives a lack of optimism sometimes. Do you think that's just getting over a little bit of the fear of doing that, of like, I don't know, you might say no kind of thing? Like if I call you?
Yeah. And again, funny, right? Like, what was the fear that the seller had 4 weeks ago?
Yeah.
The same thing, right? Like no time like the present to start getting through it, right? So I'd encourage them to even look at it and say, hey, look, there's probably a better reality today. You're going to just hear no's. Maybe change the framework and say, let me see if I can have some fun and get 50 no's today. I have some fun and go get 100 no's this week, right? Let me go confirm my suspicions that no one wants to do business with me.
Yeah.
And they'll be pleasantly surprised that it may not be true in a good way, right? With fear too, think about that from an attitude perspective. And we find that in some of the work that we do, and I know you do this, is trying to reframe some of that stuff and to change the attitude many times is what people focus on, but it's not necessarily the right way to change attitudes into a better attitude. To change behavior is an easier way to change attitude. If you do good behavior, you'll feel better. If you feel bad and you don't do behavior, you'll feel worse. So, just thinking about it that way and reframing it that way is the best way to get started on it.
That's awesome. So you're saying like your attitude is going to impact your outcome, but then sometimes taking the actions are also going to impact your attitude, which will impact your outcome.
Yep.
It's a little chicken or the egg kind of a thing you have to do. Just jump into it even when it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's like a call, right? Nothing's harder about making a call than hanging up. And then after that point, it's the easiest thing you've ever done. It feels great. Even if it didn't go well, you feel amazing because you did it. right? So the actions will determine the attitude.
Yeah, I
And
love
I'm
that.
always looking at it that way.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Um, we talked a little bit about the people feeling salesy and called. I mean, I know you do a lot of the Sandler method, which is fantastic, and I've attended some of your training workshops and things like that. And I sent you a note that I've even used some of the stuff recently, and it's worked really well for us.
Love that story.
So I think that, I mean, what do you, people shouldn't, I think your message, one of your messages is you shouldn't come across as salesy anyway.
Yep.
So it's not like dial it down now. It should never be salesy. So if you're not salesy, salesy, how do you sell? Like, to give me like a big picture, like overview. If it's not salesy, then what's the mindset we should have?
So the mindset should be, what I'm always looking for is the description that I provide of relevant pains we solve and fix. How does it land with the person I'm sharing that with, right? And that's kind of that shift that I think allows people to sell without selling. So instead of calling up a company today and saying, there's no better time than the present to start figuring out how to help your, fractured sales team learn how to sell through webinar and learn how to be better trained and have a better mindset. And that's what I'm calling you about today, is to tell you how to do that stuff and try to sell you a package around it. I'd be much better off, or my preferred methodology would be to call that person and say, hey, do you mind if I take a half minute and share with you why I called? And then suggest something like, we've been working with a fair amount of businesses. Here's what we're hearing. They're struggling to some degree, and they've kind of recognized that they're struggling to some degree managing a workforce that's now working from home that they were used to having coming into the office. And maybe they've also recognized that what they didn't really have all along was a behavior plan that allowed that sales team no longer coming into the office to operate at a high level. I don't know your world like you do. Is any of that relevant and worth you and I spending some time talking about? And so just kind of framing it in that picture and painting it that way.
I've learned, Erik, too, that, I'm a recovering engineer, and engineers are world renowned for our people skills and ability to connect with folks. But I've learned, as I've learned to get into the selling mode, that there's no mode to get into. It's very natural. It should get back to the idea that you're just trying to help people. I'm just asking, it's a relationship, and I'm asking for, like you talk about asking permission a lot. Like, I'm asking for permission from the other person. How are you doing right now? What can I do to help you? But even showing up and offering up, saying, are you dealing with this? Is this something that, are you willing to come to the table to be able to help with? We work with a lot of like organizations where they're selling things as resources, accountants, professional services, marketing, going to the table and saying, what are you struggling with right now? And what can we help you with? How can we become part of creating that plan for you?
Yeah.
Not necessarily selling the thing that at the end, but taking the process to get there.
Yes.
Use your product while you're selling. I guess that's not a question. I guess I just said a bunch of stuff. And
I agree. It was a good statement.
That's a good statement. So let's be optimistic a little bit, thinking about the future. So a good friend of mine said, while no one would have chosen this crisis, don't waste a crisis, right? There's always an opportunity in a crisis. Do you think that there's some opportunities here, and what do you think some of those are for organizations and businesses?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being, very, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. If I'm looking at it as an opportunity, and I'm with you, right? Obviously, there's some terrible things that are coming along with it that have nothing to do with business, and we're all thinking about that. But if it's an opportunity from a business perspective, in competitive landscapes, if someone sells into a competitive landscape where their big win is someone else's big loss, there's no time like the present to remind those prospects that aren't your clients yet that you're doing the right stuff that your competition's not doing. Competitive displacement in crisis times, that's one of the easiest ways to trigger that conversation and get it to start moving the right way. There are the majority of sales teams done, I would argue, well, we wouldn't argue, we're in agreement with it, but I would tell someone who was asking me, the majority of sales teams, by my calculation, aren't doing the right things right now, because I see it, right? And I see a lot of it. So the ones that are going to do the right things, if they're in competitive landscapes, are likely to become a better partner. This is a great time to be able to demonstrate that, not by telling people that you're a better partner, but by doing the things we're talking about to demonstrate you're a better partner.
Right. Because if you're already a little salesy, then you feel a lot salesy when you're in a bad situation like this.
Yeah.
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 I think that's a great distinction there in terms of what competition's doing. I was even talking to somebody who's an accountant today, and she's been calling her clients and talking to everybody. And she said, she made the comment, she says, you know, if your accountant hasn't called you,
Yeah.
you know, through this crisis yet, like, what kind of a partner are you looking for? And you're right, there's an opportunity in that of who stood by me while I was going through this. Who were
Absolutely.
my friends?
You know, I'm thinking of some of the clients that we do work with in professional advisory services, right? And I've got teams where, you know, I know some of them are doing the things that we're recommending, and it's becoming glaringly obvious that some of them aren't doing it. And that's happening across the board. So yeah, if there's an opportunity and you work in competitive landscapes like that, this is a great one to be able to demonstrate what a true partnership looks like by just making the call and having the connection.
Yeah.
Because they may not have gotten it from the people that they are working with.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to leave it right there. That is the perfect statement. I think you summarized everything we talked about right there in that one sentence. So just saying, reaching out to people, and you're the partner that's with them through this whole thing,
Yep.
meeting their needs. You know, that's what sales should be. That's what it always should have been. And now it's even more important. And there's all the bad selling that's out there right now is even going to stick out even more. So yeah, that's right. We have an opportunity to bring even more value to our clients as we
Yeah. You know, there's one other thought that I got there too that might be an opportunity or an opportunistic approach to it, is to reframe every conversation as a cost savings dialogue, right? You know, trying to figure out how do we help save some costs in your world.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you're going to give stuff away for free necessarily, but again, going back to solving the problems that we should have been solving all along, if we're doing that well, it's a cost savings conversation. And that's what every business would be interested in right now. How do I cut costs without cutting service? How do I cut costs without cutting quality, right?
There's a moment of bravery in that, calling to try to sell them something by starting off by saying we should save money.
Yes. 5 seconds of guts.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yep.
like that. But they're going to come around if it's legit and you really can help them with that, and you find something, then you're in and you can really help them with it.
Yes.
And even if they don't buy something from you in that moment, you become a partner with them.
Yes.
All right. Well, Erik, I really appreciate your time today. I know you're super busy and running through things and hanging out. Hopefully, keeping yourself safe and healthy. And,
Yeah. Never too busy to spend time with you, Don. I'm very grateful that you invited me to do this. It's so interesting too. So when I saw you last time, that was the last live event that I did so far this year.
Yeah.
Hopefully we will be back to doing some of those again in the not too distant future. But it was great spending time with you there, and it was great spending time with you today.
Yeah, appreciate it, Erik. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks.
Thank you.